Yeah. So good morning, students. Again, we are on the course MSD 013, that is Socio-Cultural System. And in our previous class, we just had a look at what connects the society, culture, and the environment. And one of the important aspect of the environment is the resources. You very well know that the resources actually they are one of the component of the environment by virtue of which all the interference actually what we are seeing that what has occurred into the environment and environmental settings, it is basically because of the resource potential of the various environmental components. In today's session we will see that how as a society, because in our previous class we studied about the different forms of the society like agricultural society, nomadic society, and today's modern society. So how does human society deal with the resources and what the relationship of the individual communities who are there who constitute the society, how it has changed, what is the interface between the society, between the culture, the resources, and also most importantly the technology aspect. So how does it change, what connects them together, and how we have differentiated our use of the resources with the respect of technology and so on and so forth. So let us begin the session. First of all, it is very important for us to understand that what is actually a resource. You have studied course 2 where you have deliberated in detail about the resources of various kinds. There are biotic resources and the abiotic resources that you know, and you understand that from our own purposes, it is something which we get from the environment, which is useful for us. We derive some benefit out of it. We make our lives convenient, comfortable, and also it helps us to do our jobs efficiently. But when I say resources are seen and the perception is different, then what does it mean? Look at the fisheries, look at the other resources which are there in our surroundings. Do they have a cultural value? Do we all agree that what the sun, the winds, the farms, the mountains, the forests, the minerals, do you agree that they have a cultural value? What does it mean? Is that every resource, the use when it starts in the beginning, the use of the resource, the level of the usage of the resource, and I must say that there is a kind of a connection between the culture of a place, the traditions of a place, and the use of the resources in that place. And therefore, there may be societies to them minerals may be a resource, they may not be a resource at all. But for an industrial society, yes, the minerals are very, very important. So what I mean to convey is that how do we live? What occupations are we indulged in? What is our lifestyle? That actually tells us about the resource, and according to that, we accord a certain value to the resource. Okay, so there may be times, the communities who live in the forest, who may be having a lot of mineral deposits beneath their earth. There may be rich reserves of oil at the place where they have been living, but since they are not using it, since they do not want those resources, they are merely thriving on the resources which are available to them by which you can call it as the biotic resources, which is important and essential and enough for them for their subsistence. So they have no value for the minerals or whatever the precious metals they may be having in their surroundings. So for them, the resource is not those minerals or those precious elements, but for them, the resources will be what they are getting and using it for their own survival. So that is why we say that resources are culturally produced. Unless and until we do not know our resource, unless and until we do not have any association with the resource, we cannot call it as a resource. Yes, there are many resources which may be present today, but we are not using it. We don't know how to use them because of the lack of technology or maybe insufficient knowledge. Are you getting me on this point? So a resource is resource only when it is used, na? Only culturally. How do we use it? do we know and how do we use those resources? That is the learning of through culture. We know very well that culture makes us understand various things about our nature. Culture is adaptive. We learned in our previous class. So if the culture is adaptive, that means we change according to the cultural settings. Then this might also hold true for the resources as well. So what resources we are using, they also undergo a cultural transition. Okay, and you should have no denying to this fact that the resources which once considered to be very useful, very important, have no such importance as of today. Whatever the oil, whatever the petroleum products we are using it today, they are a vital resources for the coming generation because they may be using some other resource. So this is the culturally how we have changed, how we are living, how we are communicating. Then again, I would like to stress upon this point that there is a dynamic nature of the resource. Yes, it is not static. We consider solar energy as a resource, but don't you think so that once that solar energy was simply used to keep your to provide light or to keep you warm during winters, but then it was used for drying of the grains, for drying of the clothes, such type of thing was there, and now we are into the usage of solar energy for the production of vast amount of energy. So the resource is same, but the nature of the resource has changed. That is the dynamic nature of the resource. So the resource is same, but the nature of the resource has changed.
Ma'am, we are losing you in between and you're on mute. Ma'am, please unmute.
Am I audible?
Yeah, now you're ready.
Let me reconnect because I think there is some problem with the internet connection. Let me reconnect. Can you see the screen and me and my voice as well? Is it audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we were discussing the nature of the resources, which is quite dynamic. What I want to say is that our needs keep on changing. With the changing times, we live differently. We use resources in a different manner. And so by virtue of this, what is happening is that the, the same resources with the same properties are used in a different manner. So it explains clearly that the nature of the resource is dynamic. Consider the case of uranium, for example, which has been mentioned over here. Uranium was just a rock for some time, unless and until its properties and its energy value were known. At present, we are using uranium at a large scale in our nuclear power plants. Same is the case with the example of whale oil. Whale oil was used prior to our information regarding the use of petroleum and petroleum products as a oil. Before that, it was used. Even whale was used as a corset, which was worn by the American and the European ladies in the 19th century. Do we use it now? Do we consider uranium as a rock nowadays? No. With the changing of our needs, with the changing of our surroundings and our connections with the nature, the new resources keep on adding. Why is it important in the present context is that as it is being worried that the nature of the environment will be such that in due course of time we will be facing a lot of problems pertaining to climate change and environmental problems. What will happen to the resources? But this is also true that because of the changing nature and the characteristics and our needs particularly, we are on our way to exploit the resources more and more to get more and more advantage out of this thing. So as we add our needs, we also keep on adding newer resources, newer methods of obtaining those resources. And of course, in all these things, the technology part is very, very important. Then identification and utility of the resource. How do we know that which resource is useful and which is not? So in that way, one of the most important thing is you must agree to this that technological knowledge or technology is very important. I say that technology itself is a resource. Technology is your know-how. It tells you how to obtain the resource and how to go about it. So this technological knowledge is an intangible resource. You may not foresee it by way of your long experiences and interactions with the nature. And it also has a social transformation because of enculturation, which we have seen in our previous class, that how culture changes. Look, keep culture at the center point and see how culture has an influence on our needs, a way of living. It has an influence by virtue of which we are also taking out and using technology for various means. And technology has an impact and it does its work through having interactions with it utilizes and has an impact on time. If you look at it, all the technologies available, it interferes with the time means the duration, the work which is being done. It has an influence on energy levels. It involves human capital. It involves tools, machinery. It involves the capital in the form of money. So any utilization and any resource identification, whether it is new oil reserves or it is new minerals or any, you can say any heavy metal which you are using today, technological knowledge is one of the most important things, because without technology, actually, it provides you an opportunity to look at the resource in different manners. And when we are talking about our relationship, the relationship of the society with respect to resources, it is incomplete without the technological know-how. Imagine the days when we were just food gatherers. At that time also, with the so-called available tools, we made an attempt to take out more from the nature, whether it is the use of boomerang, whether it is the use of bow and arrow, or in cases we used traps. And man as a species also moved different parts of the world. So it was not localized. So one of the most important thing which comes at the front runner in the utilization of the resource, that is the technological knowledge. Then another important point which is essential is social institutional mechanism for use. Social institutional mechanism means how do we bring about the distribution of those resources which we have obtained through technology. Why does starvation occurs during famine? It is not happening because the food production is less, but it is because of the insufficient and inefficient transportation of the resources which we have gotten. So even if the fact that there is ample agricultural production, ample minerals, ample oil reserves, also you can say there is a clear linkages between fisheries and poverty. So fishery is a resource which is consumed by a large population, but in spite of that, in the coastal areas, why there are certain sections of the people who are deprived of this resource. So social institutions, maybe in the form of the government organizations, the civil societies, the governance aspect, the institutions which come into the play, they also have a very important role to see that the resource is fully utilized. And in many instances, it has been seen that because of poor connections between these two, the resource gap occurs between societies, and therefore the picture of inequities and inequalities among the generations and among the different places on this planet occurs. And the technologies which is available for transmission, how do we transmit this knowledge? Because this knowledge, it also needs to be known to other peoples. And one thing which is very important, not always that the technology must be too complex to be used by the people. In many cases, in the rural areas, if you go, you will find that the people use simple technologies, and the distance between the procurement of the raw material and its consumption, if the distance is more, the chains are more, then it implies that the technology also takes into account a lot of inputs, energy consumption. So that is may not be generally considered a good option as compared to the simple technologies. So there are different stages. You just look at the stages. There's a normal stages which we know that how resources are used. You need to discover maybe accidental discoveries, or maybe it is happening because of some need, because need plays a very important role. That why do we need? So it leads to the discovery of the different the resources which are there outside. Then there is cultivation or extraction of those resources. Here also we need a lot of technological know-how, interference of various modern means by which you can use and you can take out those resources which may be beneath the earth, and you may cultivate. That is why cultivation is also mentioned over here, because if it is a biotic resource, we also go for cultivation of those resources, maybe plantations, or maybe rearing in the outside conditions, or growing of crops in certain conditions. And also that is then the transportation, the movement of those resources, then processing, distribution, transformation. There is nothing new in the steps which have been mentioned. We all know. But what is the point which we have to think over here? It's, don't you think so that in each of the stages, our society, our cultural makeup has a role to play? When we go for discovery, it of course depends upon our need as a human society. What we need, we may be needing certain things by way of our maybe our culture prompts us to live in a certain manner. So that has led to the discoveries of various kinds of resources in the past. Then how do we cultivate? Do we go for, you can say, community-based resources, or maybe single-owned resources? So what form does it take in the due course of time? Transportation, whether it is for subsistence or whether it is for the large scale transportation or large scale usage. So in today's time, for example, why is it? Because we are a cosmopolitan society today. As a human society, if you look around, you find that we are a cosmo. The goods and the materials are alike, which are used and consumed, except for a few small groups which are still relying on their old traditions and cultural norms. So this requires a lot of transportation, lot of distribution, and several forces, social institutional forces and the technological forces come into the play. So these stages also relate to the human society in a various different way. Similarly, as I said, society plays a very important role in the selection of red meat is not good. In some societies, even having non-vegetarian is not allowed. They don't prefer. So in that way, the society is playing its role in the usage of a particular resource. And one more thing, as I said earlier, not all the resources are used and utilized. There are various communities in the deep forest. You will find that the tribals are well aware of the various varieties of the fruits or the fruit parts which they can use and consume. But still, they are using only 5 or 6 species. What does it indicate? That they have a preferences. So it is not necessary that all the resources which are present in their surroundings are equally used, they're equally consumed. And therefore, again, why is it so? Then again, you will be able to relate it to the culture, that why, in spite of having so many edible crops, the communities are still eating only 5 or 6, because it is the culture which makes them to eat only these things. When the culture changes, when the attitude of the people changes, when there is a more knowledge about the usage of different types of crop species, there will be utilization of other resources also, which is there. And you can relate it to not just your food items which are edible, also other forms of your living, maybe the clothes you are wearing, or the type of houses you are building. Why the same materials are being used? Because culturally we are made to live in this manner. We are made to wear clothes in this manner. We are made to look in this manner. So only those resources are utilized and consumed. So in this also, there are several societal factors which are responsible for the usage of the resources. There are certain society governs. In society, as we were talking that time also, it is our perceptions, our attitudes, our beliefs, and our values. So availability of that resource is very, very important, the ample amount. But in spite of that, if the technology is not suitable, if you're not using, we do not have the know-how, and the technology has to be cheap also. As I said, it is not, because look at the example of the earlier days when bow and arrow, or even the people use traps when they had no tool to catch any animal. So they used traps, technology, as I said. So availability of the resources, it must be there, whether it is in the form of the food crops, whether it is in the form of some suitable oil for them to be used, or certain metal, or some stone articles, whatever it is there in the available conditions, that governs. Technology must be simple. Technology necessarily does not mean that you have to invest a lot, because as and when there is a longer chain between obtaining the resources and consuming at the final stage, that technology generally is energy intensive. Again, I will take you and give you the example of the primitive times, where we ate what was being grown on the fruits. We just utilized, there was only the muscle power which was required to take and to capture the edible food items which were there. So there was a less interference of technology in that sense. Similarly, the needs, because they also are important, because what we do not need today, we not require also. We never needed so many things which are a kind of a basic need today, we must say. So accordingly, the search for new things begin. And how we are living today, and how our ancestors have lived today. So economy actually decides the scale of consumption. The economy means, an economy is dependent upon it has an impact on the production, how much we are producing, that is also governed by the economy. How much we are consuming, that is also dependent upon the economy, because if you are a good economy, we are consuming more, we are producing more. And also another important thing which is important is your transmission, that how you are using that. And the power, the politics also comes into the role in this manner, because there are egalitarian and advanced societies. I must tell you one thing: when man lived in groups, when we were small groups of people dependent upon whatever is present in the outside surroundings, at that time there was no scarcity. I must tell you, there was a kind of a sharing of the resources. So at that time, everything what was there was free for everyone to be used. That is the feature of the egalitarian societies. And at that time, even if there was any stress in the form of any natural disasters or any failure, at that time also the sharing was done. That was the feature with all the members of the society. But when you talk about the advanced societies, now we have the sharing of the distribution of power between different groups. So there are different subunits, different communities, different institutions which have a control on different aspect of the resource use. Some are producing, some are transporting, some are, again, that's an example of the chain of the chain between the procurement and the usage of the raw materials. So that chain is actually, it is what it is, your advanced, the feature of the advanced society. So another important factor is the exercise of the power, the control of the resource. I must tell you that that emerged into the control of the resources by certain groups, which decided the production of that resource, the distribution of that resource, and the consumption of that resource. So in many cases, we do not have any idea about what are the stocks of the reserves which we are using today, how much of it is lasting. So the control of the resources, as I was referring here, there was a concept of adaptive radiation which was given by Marshall Salins, and he proposed that there is a political and economic means of control. What does it mean in that sense? That as I gave the example of sun and the solar energy in the beginning, that there is a kind of a modification of the resources, change of the resources, and diversified use of the resources which comes into the play. And because of the fact that there is a political and economic control of the resources by certain sections of the people, the resource use, it becomes like a commodity where it is not free, and it is considered like you have to go for economic valuation of the resources. So in the past times, the same resources which were used by uh, hunter-gatherer society, agricultural society, industrial society, if you look into these things, you will find that the resources have changed their characters. Our interaction with those resources has gone a sea change because of their modification and their diversification. Even if you take the example of agriculture alone, the same agricultural society also alone, this as simple as that, water, which is the bare minimum requirement to practice agriculture. Look at look at the way by which we use water and view water as a resource. In the initial times, it was uh, which was there in the rivers, or it was the rainfall which we were growing the crops according to the weather conditions and according to geology of a certain place. But with changing times, we are devising new methods of dam construction and new techniques of irrigation, and now water is seen in a very different manner. So that gives us that we have the control over the resources in different manner. So as I said, there is a role of technology in control of the resources. When I say that the resources are being owned and controlled and used in a different manner by different groups of the people, technology is a important constraint and also an opportunity, because it is considered as a double-edged sword. When you use it in a equitable manner, when it is simple, that is why I said simple technologies are still used by the farmers and the rural people at their own places, and they get more benefits as compared to the technology advancements which we do, because in the long run, see, the industrial capitalist duration is only 400 and 500 years. Before that, it was the pre-industrial area which lasted for several thousand years. That had a long span as compared to the industrial capitalist era. And in that small span of 400, 500 years, look at the state of the environment and ecosystems today, which has led to pollution and degradation of all kinds. So simple technology, which can be used by many, should be the answer. Technology may not be such that it takes into too much of the capital, but does not meet the requirements of the large sections of the population. So, social institutional mechanisms which will operate that technology, that is also equally important, because technology may sound to be too good, too efficient, but if it cannot be operated, simple examples is waste to energy treatment plants that we propose that will solve the problem of many issues, but if it is not easily operationalized, if it is not being handled by the people at the local level, grassroots level, then it is not a viable solution, I must say. So the interference between the resources and technology must also consider that it must be simple, it must be easy to use. So there's a theory of social change, which was given and written by Julian Stewart, and he has described that the relationship between the techno-economic system and the habitat, means human beings, it's a kind of a dialectical relationships, means there is a kind of a reciprocal relationships between, because as human beings explore their surroundings more and more, they interfere with the technology and the economic systems. It, in the long run, proves to be detrimental to its own existence. That is why we say that we are indulged in the self-destructing activities. First of all, we devise a technology to solve a problem. Then at another span of time, we need some other technology to mitigate the effects of the earlier technology which we had invented. So it is a never-ending phenomena kind of a thing that goes on, and therefore this needs a roadmap where we can see that how we have to use the resources for the common benefit, for the benefit of the poor. Just look at the stages which I was just referring to it, because when you see the dialectic relationship between the environment and the economy and the technology and the resources at the other hand, at every stage you will find, whether it is your food gathering stage or pastoral stage or cultivation stage, you will find that with the changes which were taken account, the magnitude of the change in the technology used for the resource extraction, there is a greater magnitude on the impact also. And on to the other hand, it does not seem to benefit a large population. So at every stage, you will find that there is a kind of a techno-economic adaptation in the beginning, but later on, when you closely look at it, it percolates into some other kind of a stage. And at every stage, you will find that initially, maybe the inefficiencies there, maybe the a kind of, you can say, unpredictable resources may be there at certain times time. For example, you may not get the food when you are roaming around. You have to spend large amount of energy to obtain the food for living, which is quite easy as we seen today. But there has to be a kind of a equal distribution, because with technology and with modern means of living, there is also a huge gap between haves and have-nots. So yes, we have so many things, but there is a large section of the people who have not access to those resources which we are obtaining, searching, getting, using, exploiting, consuming, but still many are devoid of. So unless and until a balance is achieved, it is very difficult to understand. So the resource consumption, as I said, it has moved from simple to complex. We eat whatever was there in the surroundings. Then we started cultivating. Now we are in the process of getting hybrid crops and whatnot in the laboratories we want to produce. We want designer foods. We want designer crops. It's a complex way of consumption. And when it is becoming more complex, our relationship with the resource procurement also has a change. Because in the hunter-gathering stage, we were dependent upon whatever was there, it was enough for our subsistence. It was enough to keep us alive. And as I said, when there was any crisis, when there was any climatic change, weather related, any issues, weather related, any phenomenon taking place which adversely affected and made the resources not available. So sharing was very much common. So nature was considered as free good. However, today we view nature in a, we call it natural capital. The terminologies have changed. We say it's the natural capital because we want to leverage on that capital. We want to use it for our economic benefit. And that is why we call it, the latest slides that will come, it was the commodification of nature, commodification of resources. So collective ownership, I will just take a minute to explain this. Collective ownership means whether it is a small land holding, a small pond also you can say, which has a fishes in it. So those fisheries or those crops or those small land areas which were used, they were shared by the social group. So any kind of unforeseen incident it takes place, so it was also shared among the communities. So and when the resources got exhausted, the whole community used to move from one place to another. So that was based on kinship. Today also, when you see, we have moved back to the social forestry. We talk about the agroforestry, community forest. What is this? This is again going back to the same phenomena where we want that there is a collective ownership of the resources, whether it is a forest or any green pasture, green land, any resource led area. So that is the collective ownership of the resource, and it is based on the kinship. So as I said, it was, when I say it is commodification of the natural resources, means it is a way to avoid the tragedy of the commons. When I say that soil is commodified or the forest is commodified, that means we are according a economic value to that resource. Tragedy of the commons means those resources, that is a demerit of that phenomena, that concept also, where we consider nature as free good. So when it is a free good, nobody is bothered about its over extraction or its pollution. And therefore, the tragedy of commons means those common lands which are available for free are utilized the most, are exploited the most without their regeneration. So commodification of natural resources, it's actually uh, put forward to say that it is to avoid the tragedy of the common, so that we can say that mountains, hills, ponds, aquatic resources, they have a value, they have a kind of a valuation in terms of economy. And but this is also no denying that the industrial capitalist model which we are seeing today is self-destructive, because the manner in which we are using the resources, it may be destructive in the long run. So with resources and responsibilities, we hardly discuss, because this is very important, and you as a student of sustainability science, think about it, that with the resources there also comes a responsibility. So there's a need to build the social relationships as buffers for risk management. We know the state of the affairs of the environment as of now. Look at the social relationship. We need to introspect about the earth's resources, how we are exploiting them. And also we have to see that we have a responsibility towards the resources. Now, the resources have been given to us by nature. They are the natural resources. We look at it, we use them by way of interfering with technology, our knowledge, as it has been said, but how you are using them and what benefits are we taking out of them must be in such a manner that it's not about natural resource conservation, because in today's class we are discussing about human society. So it's not about the conservation and using resources in such a manner that they're available for the future generations. That is true. But for the present generation also, many sections are devoid of, many sections are not using. And it is not always considered that the more technology you are using, you are more advanced and you are better off. Maybe it's to less pollution, less energy conservation, and so on. So it is not like that. You have to use the resources and the energies in such a manner that we forget our responsibilities. So there's a need for introspection, look around and see that how our relationship with the resources have changed in the last few years. So And that is why what happens is that whenever any resource goes in scarcity, the whole economy, goes down. We are worried about what will happen if this is not there, that is not there. So we have a promising future with respect to the new resources that we are exploiting. We are into more of the resources which are non-renewable. We are into exploring the potential of hydrogen and other elements of nature which are there. But also along with this, we must think about that how we are a responsible species, I must say, not a consumer, but as a responsible person, we must think about a proper manner in which these resources can be used. So with this I end. We can have a discussion now.